Laz, before we get into the full career journey, we're going to talk hockey, obviously, because that's what you do for us at The Athletic. And I want to know when you first became a hockey guy. Because, like, when did hockey first become something that you enjoyed? Because I've covered one hockey game in my entire journalism career. Blackhawks, Avalanche, 2017. McKinnon scored a game winner. And I remember the advice I was given before the game was, every hockey fan will know if you fake it, so do not fake it. So I have a lot of respect for people who cover hockey. So when did you become a hockey guy?
I was always a hockey. It was my favorite sport growing up. I grew up on Long Island. It was the Islanders. Me and my dad would watch every game. I was born in March of 1980, so 2 months before the Islanders rattled off 4 straight Stanley Cups. And of course, I was too young to remember any of them. So all I knew was pain and misery my entire life. The greatest sporting moment of my childhood was the Islanders winning a second-round series in 1993 when they beat the 2-time champion Penguins after Pierre Turgeon was injured. So it was a sad life, but I muddled through and survived Mike Milbury and everything. And the irony was, once I started covering hockey full-time, that's when the Islanders finally started getting their stuff together and started winning games, and I kind of lost that fandom because the job takes the fandom out of you. Like, I love the game of hockey more than I ever have, but I don't have an individual fandom anymore. I don't root for any team. So all I know is like 35 years of misery as an Islanders fan. It's kind of sad.
And you had the New York Mets as well growing up.
It's been a great life, Kev.
And we are both Northwestern fans, so we can keep going down that track. But so you grew up in Long Island, you're a big fan of Islanders and Mets. So, you and I know so many people who are diehard sports fans and grew up similarly to how we did, but they didn't decide they wanted to become a sports writer. When did that idea first pop in Mark Lazerus' brain?
Pretty young, like kind of as I'm like Henry Hill here. As long as I could remember, I always wanted to be a sports writer, right? It's like, I probably 9 or 10 years old. I mean, I kind of taught myself to read almost with the Newsday sports section, reading Marty Noble's Mets coverage and Sean Powell's columns and Jonette Howard and all these great writers that Newsday had. I would run downstairs. I would grab part 2 of Newsday to read the comics, and I would grab the sports section to read all about, all my favorite teams and even the teams I didn't like. I read about the Yankees and I read about the Jets, all these teams I didn't care about. I read about the Rangers just because I loved sports writing. I loved the idea of it and always wanted to be a traveling sports writer. And, I took a long and winding road to get into where I wanted to be, but it's still crazy to me. Like, every time I go to cover a game on Long Island at UBS Arena and I look down and I see on my little placard, the New York Islanders welcome Mark Lazerus, the Athletic. It's like it's corny, but it's like a pinch myself moment, a reminder of this, like, how cool is this? What if I showed 13-year-old me this? How cool is that, right? So I try not to forget that.
That's an awesome feeling, and I have that too. When again, this is our dream job. So and it's a really special thing that you never want to take for granted. So you want to do sports writing. You target the greatest journalism school and greatest university in the world, Northwestern, of course.
Of course.
And I know you did the day at Northwestern there, but one thing that I noticed, so you interned at the Palm Beach Post. And was that through Northwestern's internship program?
Yes. The spring of 2000, that was the teaching newspaper. And the Palm Beach Post was the only, we call it TN, in our insider lingo, was the only paper involved that would allow their intern to do sports. So it was always like really heavy competition to get the Palm Beach Post spot. And well, just so happened, my grandma lived in West Palm Beach. So that was my in. I didn't have to pay to live anywhere. So I gave me the inside edge and they sent me down there. And it's funny. It was supposed to be an internship. You cover high school sports, maybe some senior PGA events and stuff like that. My very first day at the Palm Beach Post, I'm in an orientation meeting with, I think Tim Burke was the editor and a couple of the other writers. And I'm meeting like the Metro editor. They're just introducing me around. Here's the intern, whatever. And someone comes into the room and says, Israel Gutierrez has the mumps. We need someone to cover spring training. He was covering the Marlins at the time, who went on to become very famous at ESPN. Antonio Alfonseca got the mumps and he gave it to like half the Marlins beat. And all of a sudden they didn't have a writer. So they just literally pulled me out, like grabbed me by the shirt collar almost and pulled me out of the meeting and said, do you want to go on like a 10-day spring training road trip? I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do. Let's go. And and I was off, and I acquitted myself well enough that the rest of the internship there was mostly covering pro sports. I covered the Florida Panthers in the playoffs. I covered a little bit Miami Heat. I did a bunch of Marlins. I did cover the PGA, the senior PGA. I covered the U.S. Open of polo, because this is Palm Beach we're talking about. There's some rich people down there. I don't know if you knew that. It turned into this amazing opportunity that is like, my career is just a series of falling ass backward into good luck situations, and that was kind of the first one.
Okay, so we've got April 2nd, 2000. Headline, rookie
Uh-oh.
Bergeron leads with his confidence. And the lead from a young intern, Mark Lazerus. For a guy with only 27 days of Major League service, Peter Bergeron has a lot of expectations on him for the coming Expos season. The Montreal rookie, his only big league acquisition, a September call-up last season, has been handed the Expos leadoff position. The center fielder already has been called a potential Rookie of the Year candidate based upon his stellar spring performance. Bergeron, 22, is not fazed by the attention.
Who the hell is Peter Bergeron? I just assumed it was Patrice Bergeron you were talking about. Who is?
I know.
I have no idea who that is. What are the Montreal Expos? How old am I?
Right? And I was thinking it's good that one of your first bylines is about a guy who you confuse with an NHL player, because that's what you're known for now. So
it's funny. My very first assignment on that spring training road trip, they wanted me to do a feature on Marlins, I think it was third baseman, Mike Lowell. He had just come back. He had cancer the year before, and he was coming back. They wanted this big story on it. And they told me, write 25 inches. I'm like, all right, big feature. Cool. And I work on it, and I toil over it, and I'm really working so hard on it. I love it. It's great. And I send it in, and I get a call almost like within like 3 minutes of me filing it. Just copy editor just screaming at me, why did you send us a 74-inch story? Like, what are you talking about? It was 25 inches. He's like, it was like 1,500 words. I'm like, yeah, that's like 25 inches. Maybe at the Daily Northwestern, but everyone here is old and blind. We have a 12-point font here. We wanted 700 words. And my very first story, my very first professional paper just got eviscerated by the desk there. It was the most just crushing, it's like, oh, my baby, all my words are my babies, and you're just stealing them all. It was horrible.
As I was going through some of the Palm Beach Post headlines, I do have a story about a Brian Keno who won a 5K. You wrote about that. And going through, it seems like a ton of different sports. It felt like you had a byline every single day. Were you just like kind of just living the dream? Like, you're in college, this is what you want to do, and you were just getting thrown into this every single day. You're getting sent somewhere else to write another article.
Oh, it was amazing. I covered the FINA diving championships one day. Like, it was whatever they wanted me to do. I was like, it was supposed to be like 3 weeks of it. I was supposed to be on the desk, but I was having so much fun and I was doing well enough that they changed the rules and allowed me to keep going. I couldn't get enough. Also, I was living with like an 80-year-old woman in a retirement community. It's not like I had a lot of things to do back home. So I was like, any assignment you give me, I was so gung-ho about it. I was so excited. It was such a great paper. The Palm Beach Post in 2000 might have been one of the 3 or 4 best sports sections in the world. It was so good. The staff was amazing. The creativity of the design and the story ideas they were writing about, it was so good. And it was so exciting to be working at a place like that I just couldn't get enough of it. I never wanted to be off. It was amazing.
So you have a byline on June 10th, 2000, writing about a Miami Fusion versus Chicago Fire match.
I remember that one.
And then 12 days later, your next byline is you're covering a race in Appleton. So this is when you go to your next internship. I mean, I'm curious, how did you get that internship it was at the Post Crescent, right?
The Post Crescent, yes. Another huge break for me, because I was not very organized as a college student and didn't know you had to like get internships several months in advance. So I'm in like my last week in Palm Beach, and I realized, oh crap, I have nothing lined up for the summer. What am I going to do? And then Sam Eifling, who's he's working in Arizona now. He's editing like an alt weekly there, but he used to work at Deadspin. He's been at a whole bunch of cool places. Great writer, good friend of mine. He had an internship lined up in Appleton, Wisconsin, and got a better offer at the last minute. And he calls me up and he's like, I've got this internship. It's covering minor league baseball in Northeast Wisconsin. And I'm like, I'll take it. Yeah, let's go. So he recommends me to Larry Gallup, who was the editor at the Post Crescent at the time. They took a chance on me. I sent him a bunch of my clips from Palm Beach. My dad flew down to Florida. We drove all the way up to Wisconsin. And then I covered like minor league baseball for a week. And then all of a sudden, the paper goes into a hiring freeze because it's in the process of being sold. I think it was called the Thompson chain, and they were being bought by Gannett or something like that. So there's a hiring freeze. And the next day, our Packers writer, and so help me, I can't remember his name, took a job covering the Vikings for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. So all of a sudden, there's no Packers writer at the paper. They had one guy who was like the backup who was elevated to the top, and they didn't have a number 2. And Appleton, Wisconsin's like 20 minutes from Green Bay. Like the Packers are only thing that matters there. So all of a sudden, I'm the only guy that got, right? So all of a sudden, instead of covering single A baseball for the summer, I'm covering the entirety of Packers training camp. I'm still 20 years old, having the time of my life, writing about Brett Favre's thumb every single day. And it was just another lucky break along the way that Sam got a better offer, and then there's a hiring freeze, and all of a sudden my clips package has Stanley Cup playoffs and NBA playoffs and Major League Baseball and NFL, and all of a sudden like I can compete for cool jobs because look at all the stuff I've covered at 20 years old.
Okay, August 1st, 2000. We've got headline, Favre's thumb doing just fine. Here's your lead. It was the ultra-competitive nature in Brett Favre that got him here in the first place. Had he just taken a week or 2 off at the time, he probably wouldn't be answering the same question over and over again. But there Favre was last week addressing the media, and it's still the first question asked about his thumb. First of all, great lead, I think. Yeah. So what was it like covering Brett Favre's thumb, the summer of his thumb?
It was a little repetitive. It literally was the first question every time. I don't even remember who the head coach of the Packers was back then. We're talking quarter century ago now. But
Mike Sherman.
Mike Sherman, that's right. It would be the first question we would ask every day, and then every time we talked to Favre, he always had this big wrap ace bandage and ice around his thumb, and every day was cool. Like in Lambeau Field, there's like every paper had its own little cubicle right outside the press conference area. So you just kind of like, it was kind of like working at the State House or like the White House in the press room. It was, so mine was like the first door outside of it. And every day Favre would leave his bucket of ice or his bag of ice on the table, like right outside my office. And every day I would like joke, what would I get on eBay if I sold Favre water? If I sold this Ziploc bag of water that has touched Brett Favre, how many hundreds of dollars could I get it? Because I was not making a lot of money on this internship. I never actually went through with it, but I thought about it every day.
It's interesting, Laz, because you talk about like how many awesome clips you got, all this great experience. Man, we've talked about all these different pro sports things, and you're still in college. Like, we're still talking about your internship, and not to get a little bit down about the industry, but as we're talking about this, I feel for college students now that it's so rare to be able to get these internships and get at these newspapers. Like when you think back to this era, I guess, like for maybe some younger people who aren't as familiar with it, like how would you describe just like what sports pages were like as you were getting started in the industry?
There was a lot more sports pages. The sports section was a lot thicker, right? I don't know. It's weird because you look around now and there's so many, like even on the Hawks beat, Ben Pope was like 23 years old when he gets on the Hawks beat at the Sun-Times. And Kalen Lumpkin's now at the Tribune. He's a young guy. He's on the Hawks beat. And I feel like because so many of these places can't make big hires of like veteran, they don't have the budgets to hire a veteran writer or hire anybody. If you have like an internship and you get your foot out, you're covering high school sports for a paper, you're on the agate desk, you can kind of work your way into it. Like it's worse in so many ways. Don't get me wrong. I'm not stupid. Even in 2000, we were talking about how print was dying. But I feel like it's almost like being young and cheap, for better or worse, is almost an advantage now. And I feel like there's more very young pro beat writers out there than maybe there ever was. You used to have to kind of like, I was 32 when I started covering the Hawks. I covered high schools for years. I was a designer. Like there was a 10-month span where I didn't write at all because they wouldn't let me. Like it took me a long time to work my way up to that. And some people would walk out of the Daily Northwestern and walk right into a pro beat. Like Brad Weinstein, I remember, went right out and was covering the Golden State Warriors for the San Francisco Chronicle. I didn't do that. I took you could either be a big fish in a small pond or you could be a small fish in a big pond. And I think small fish in the big pond, to getting your foot in the door at a big paper, that's probably a smarter way to go than the way I did it.
All right, let's talk about the way you did it. What was your first job and how did you get it?
Well, it was supposed to be an internship at the San Jose Mercury News. That was what I had lined up. And it paid like so much money because it's so expensive to live out there. And when you're 21 years old and they're like, you're going to make I don't know what it was, like $1,500 a week or something like that for 10 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, that's all the money in the world. And then like 2 weeks before I graduated early. I graduated in March. And 2 weeks before I was graduating, they had a hiring freeze and they canceled all their internships. And all of a sudden I was like in a panic. But a job I had like kind of casually applied to in Western PA, the Washington Observer Reporter, they were looking for a Penguins writer, Pittsburgh Penguins writer. And I had applied. It's kind of like, the Daily Herald, where you cover home games, you don't travel much. And that was the year that Mario Lemieux came back and unretired. So it was very exciting. And I got the job, which I on my 21st birthday, I took my last final of the year, my last final ever. So I graduated essentially on my 21st birthday, and I got the call that I got that job. So that was, we went to Hamilton's that night, and I was there. I had some fun that night. It's funny though, because you go back to the Palm Beach Post, and it's not something I always remember. It's I have a terrible memory. It's funny that you're calling up these stories, and I have no idea who Patrice Bergeron's doppelganger is there or anything, but I distinctly remember my exit interview at the Palm Beach Post, sitting down with Tim Burke, who became kind of a bigwig in the journalism world. He was a sports editor at the time. He was going through. It was kind of like an exit interview. Here's what you did well. Here's what you can work on. Here's what you need to do. I covered like, I don't know, 5-6 days of the Panthers Devils series that spring. It was a sweep, so it didn't last long. And he told me, he said, this is his exact quote. I remember, he goes, "I don't know what you're going to be doing, but I'm pretty sure you're going to be covering hockey." He said that he could tell in my copy how much more into the story I was when I was writing about hockey as opposed to writing everyone else, which is not good. Like, it shouldn't come across that obvious. Like, you should show the same passion no matter what you're covering. But he said it was so, and then for my first job to be an NHL job, even at a small paper, that stuck with me for a while. That, oh my God, he was really good at his job. He was right.
All right, so you head out to Western PA. So what were your kind of responsibilities? What was the day-to-day?
Well, the job was to cover the Penguins at home, like every home game and practice when they're there. The Penguins were a very big deal still. It was right before the bottom fell out on them. And the guy before me had been there for 25 years, Bob Grove. He still does Penguins radio. And he was the kind of like legendary local beat writer who could get Wayne Gretzky on the phone whenever he wanted. So like I was some brash, dumbass 21-year-old kid walking into this press box. And I was accorded the respect that comes with being Bob Grove's replacement. Like, I was sitting next to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the Tribune Review. Like, I was sitting next to Dave Molinari, who's in the Hall of Fame. Like I was, while all the other small papers and radio guys were like way down the press box. So I got afforded all this respect that I hadn't earned and didn't deserve because I was an asshole. I was just like this dumb 21-year-old kid who thought he knew everything, right? But I was so adamant, like the job was covering the Penguins and high school sports. And I was, on Long Island, we don't care about high school sports. Like, high school sports are not a thing. I was sports editor of my high school paper and never covered a football game. Like, it's not a thing we did. Nobody cared. But I was supposed to be covering high school football, but I so badly didn't want to do that I taught myself to become a page designer, basically. And I got pretty good at it. So if I wasn't at Mellon Arena or at the practice rink, I was designing pages that night. I became a copy editor. I spent years kind of becoming writing headlines and designing pages and using Photoshop and toning photos. Like, I learned the whole inside of the business. It was great. It was one of these old school places where at 12:30 at night, we'd walk downstairs to the basement and the presses are rolling and you can get a fresh copy and there's ink smear. I was a literal ink stained wretch. It was amazing. It was so much fun. And I was there from 01 to 04, right until the lockout, when I knew it was time to move on.
What did you like about doing page design and copy editing?
I don't know. I mean, I'm a pedant, so editing is right up my alley. Like, I love correcting people, as anyone who's ever followed me on Twitter knows. But I like the design. I like the puzzle aspect of it. I'm good on deadline. Like, I like working in a rush. So I like it when there's like 6 stories coming in on a Friday night at the very last second, and you got to put them together, and you got to write cogent headlines, and you got to piece it all together and map it all out. And I like writing puns, so I like the headline writing of it. I was surprised how much I enjoyed that. And that's how I got out. When I was in Pittsburgh, I was, 400 miles from home, New York, and 400 miles from like my adopted home, Chicago. And I was lonely as hell. I'm in my early 20s, just like in this terrible apartment at the armpit of I-70 and I-79, just doing nothing when all my friends were like middle-aged men, because that's who I was working with. And I'm working every Friday and Saturday night. I had no life at all. So I just wanted to get out. So I started there was this old website called Newspage Designer, and you could put your best designs on it. And you would get it was so hard to find designers back then and these papers had such big sections and such robust stats. You would get job offers just from Newspage Designer without even applying for them. I got offered a job at like the Jackson, Mississippi paper. Thought that was a bad place to go to for a New York Jew, and I kind of stayed away. And I get this offer from the Post Tribune of Northwest Indiana. They reached out to me. It was Derry, Indiana, so it's close to Chicago, right? It's about as close as I can get. That's where all my friends are. Go out there, interview for it, and I'm telling them, like, I want to write. Just so you know, I'm a writer, but I can design. I'm a writer, but I can design. And they said, sure, yeah, they're humoring me. I go out there, and then literally the day I arrived in Northwest Indiana, in Griffith, Indiana, with my moving van for my little one-bedroom apartment, I got a job offer from the White Plains paper in New York, the Journal News, the Gannett paper up there, to be their sports designer. But I'd already committed, so that's the big sliding doors moment of my life, is what if I had went to New York instead of Chicago area. But for 10 months, I was just designing pages. I was doing news design, and I was editing sports copy and doing sports pages, front pages and stuff like that. I was taking, high school swimming agate and, those endless track box scores to get the dozen a night. Like, that was my job. I was doing grunt work, formatting Major League Baseball box scores. I liked it. I loved it, but I was just begging every day for them to let me write again.
For those of you, not that anybody would doubt your deadline ability, but I do want to point out to our Bears fans who listen, because I'm guessing there's a few Bears fans who listen because of what I do. If you're wondering why the Bears have been so bad for so long, Mark Lazerus' 1 year with us helping out at Bears home games was 2018.
I was like 2 or 3 years. I was there for a little while.
The big year was 2018, obviously. I think maybe
true,
that was your first year. Maybe it was your first year when you joined us.
Yeah.
I think you were there. You were there with us for 2019. But yeah, I would watch you write. It'd be a late night game, and suddenly you are just pounding those keys, and 1,500 words are in, and I'm staring at a blank document.
I have one marketable skill. I write really, really fast. If I ever get like kicked out of this business, I'm so screwed. There's like no other job where what I do well will translate.
Okay, so this is breaking in. How did you kind of break back in, I guess, to being a writer full time?
Just through perseverance, really. I was 24 and I wasn't ready to give up on the writing side of my career yet. So I was in, it was like this. We were a good paper. Like, it had, I was producing 72-page high school football tabs every year. Like, we had great staff and a healthy competition with the Times of Northwest Indiana, 2 really good papers. So it was a great place to work. And I was in the editor's office every day. Just, you can use me more. I can do more. I'll do it on my free time. Send me out to cover a game or whatever. And then like 10 months in, they relented. They sent me to a Maryville High School girls basketball game. I wrote a story and they're like, all right, this isn't bad. And they're like, we can do a little bit more of this. And then it was just attrition. It was our deputy sports editor left to go. He wanted to write news. So I moved into a writer's spot as someone else moved up. And then the deputy editor was hired as the sports editor of the Times. So all of a sudden I was the deputy editor. And then the sports editor left to go work in Detroit. And all of a sudden I was the sports editor for 5 years. And I was covering high school football and Valparaiso University basketball and high school baseball. And I did that for years. I was there for 8 years. And I kind of just assumed I was going to be one of those like local institutions, right? You get inducted into the local sports hall of fame because you covered high school sports for 50 years. It was a good job. I liked it. I got offered a couple of jobs here and there. There was one where I had a connection in Milwaukee and there was a Packers job opening and they basically offered it to me, but I had just gotten married at the time. We were going to have kids soon and they wanted me to move to Green Bay instead of Milwaukee. And I'm just like, I just don't think I want to do that. And I remember I covered the Super Bowl when it was in Indianapolis, when the Giants beat the Patriots for the second time. And just because it was in Indiana, my editor's like, yeah, sure, go cover it for a week. We don't care. They threw me a bone. And I get home from the Super Bowl that night, or not the hotel. I get back to the hotel in Indianapolis, and I turn on the TV, and I switch to NFL Network. And the guy that they're interviewing on NFL Network is the guy who got that job after I turned it down in Milwaukee. And it was like this soul-crushing moment. I'm like, I gave up my one shot. I had my shot. I finally had a shot at the big boy job, and I blew it. I passed it up. I'm just going to be covering Lake Central High School baseball forever. And it was like this really kind of shattering moment almost. And then everything changed like I don't know, 6 months later when the Sun-Times just basically reorganized everything.
I always ask, as you know, because I know you've listened to the show, for your welcome to the big leagues moment. And you could take this wherever you want, whether it was interaction with the player or coach or getting recognized, whenever you kind of were like, oh, this is real and I'm in it. I am doing something that people read, that people pay attention to.
It didn't happen that much in Pittsburgh, but it was the high school stuff. That's when I would get yelled at the most. Like every day I would walk into the office and my voicemail was filled with 20 minutes of parents screaming at me, MFing me, F-bombing me. There was one time, it was Christmas morning. I always worked on Christmas because it was, something I could do. And I walked in there on Christmas morning to my office, and the first voicemail I got is this guy just screaming at me about a Valparaiso University men's basketball column I had written, that some kid had gotten busted for pot and the coach was soft on him, and I kind of wrote about it. And this guy is screaming. And I hear in the background all this joy and happiness. I can literally hear his kids opening presents while he's calling the sports editor of a small suburban newspaper to scream at him over a column about mid-major basketball. Like nothing that's happened since. And I've been in, I had Rocky Wirtz yell at me very publicly, and I've had players bitten mad at me, and I've had a lot of things happen, but nothing ever made me realize how stupid our job is than that guy's voicemail on Christmas Day, 2007 or whatever it was.
All right. So what year is this going to be for you on the Blackhawks beat?
This is my 14th season.
Okay.
And I fell ridiculously into this too. I was, the Sun-Times, we were owned by the Sun-Times at the time I was at the Post-Tribune. I was sending their editor my resume like once a month. Please hire me. Please hire me. Please hire me. Sometimes like the paper I wanted to work at since I was in college. I loved the paper. I still badly wanted to work there. And they were reorganizing, trying to find ways to cut costs. And they realized, well, we cover Notre Dame a little bit, and we have a paper in Indiana. So why are we sending people that live in the north suburbs of Chicago all the way out to South Bend? Let's use one of their guys. And I was, winning awards and stuff for my football tabs, and I was doing pretty well in the small pond, and they picked me. Now the Sun-Times doesn't care about Notre Dame, never really has. It's like the job is supposed to be writing like a couple of 300-word stories a week. But that's the year they went 12-0. It was the Manti Te'o year. They went to the national championship game, 2012. And so all of a sudden I'm writing back pages and 2-page spreads, and they sent me to Ireland, and I'm going to all these games, and it turned out to be this huge audition. And the whole time the NHL's in a lockout. And Adam Johns was the Blackhawks writer, and they were moving him to the Bears beat. So like in like late October, I get a call from Chris DeLuca at the Sun-Times. He's like, hey, you know anything about hockey? I'm like, dude, I've been sending you my resume for months and years. Yes, I know stuff about hockey. You want to be our Blackhawks writer? I'm like, hell yeah, I want to be your Blackhawks writer. And, I walk right into that. And again, it's someone else's job. That something opens up, I sneak in. And Notre Dame, if Notre Dame isn't good, you have to understand, I hated Notre Dame as a kid more than anything else in the world, more than I hated the Rangers, more than I hated the Yankees, more than I hated the Cowboys. I owe my entire career to Notre Dame football being good one year, which is hilarious to me. And, it became a thing. I got hired by the Sun-Times, and, I covered Notre Dame going 12-0, and then the Blackhawks go right into 21-0-3 to start that year. They win the cup. Remember that Chicago side or something wrote this big story about me, how I was Chicago's lucky rabbit's foot because I went like 11 months without covering a regular season loss. Like it was like this, even in the spring before that, Lake Central High School baseball, like I was talking, they won the state championship with an undefeated record. Like I had no idea how to write about a loss. And all of a sudden, and then all of my career's on its way, and I've been covering hockey ever since.
That's amazing. And it's a good breaking in synergy because obviously Adam Johns was on the show, episode 20. Laz, the through line for you. So, you look at where you're at now, covering the Blackhawks, covering the NHL for us at The Athletic, and you go back to these early days when you're in Washington, when you're in Western PA, and some of the things that you're learning from that first Penguins job, even some of the things you learned at those internships. Like what traits, skills, life lessons that you learned 20, 25 years ago still shape you today?
I feel like it's taking whatever job you have seriously, right? Like I when I was 12 years old, I wasn't dreaming about covering, a Crown Point Merrillville high school football game. But when that was my job, it was the most important thing in the world. And I treated it that way. And I treated it with respect. And I covered it like I was covering the Super Bowl. Like it was a big deal. And I wanted to write the best story I possibly could. And I loved that job. That job at the Post-Tribune was great. Having 47 high schools to cover, just endless stories. I'm covering the same 20 guys year after year in the Blackhawks locker room. I kind of miss having this huge swath of people to cover. And when I was in Western Pennsylvania, when I was learning to design, I took it really seriously. And when I was taking high school agate, I took it really seriously. My baseball box score pages at the Post Tribune are masterpieces. There was never a bad break, no box score or whatever. I would move them around and I would flesh them out, and like it was symmetrical and beautiful. I always took it seriously, and I think that so many people walk into these primo jobs now. And hey, more power to them. I'm not one of these like you gotta pay your dues types, right? Like if I could have done that, I would have done that. But I do think the circuitous route I took and the fact that I've done just about every job you can do in journalism, in sports journalism at least, that I've been in on those editorial meetings and I've taken those box scores and I've covered high school baseball in a small town in the farms out in LaPorte County, Indiana. All of that kind of informed me as like, so when I got to the Blackhawks beat, when I got to the Athletic, when I finally got the big boy job, I was wholly prepared for it. Like nothing, like I was terrified. Don't get me wrong. The first time I walked into the Blackhawks locker room, I was crapping my pants, man. I was so scared and so daunted by like, now I'm covering like things people are really going to be into and all that. But I was fully prepared. Like and it made me a better writer. Being an editor made me a better writer. Being a designer made me a better visual journalist. I think about the presentation of a story. I think about headlines. I talk with my editors about graphics and things we can include because I've been in that side of things. I feel like I have a really good eye for photos, which doesn't really serve me much anymore. But like I feel like I could be dropped in as a deputy photo editor somewhere and probably hold my own. I understand how the business works. I've worked in newspapers with printing presses, and I've worked at the internet in a San Francisco startup, and now I'm at the New York Times essentially. Like I feel like I've had every job you can have in this business. And I'm only 45 years old. I got a long way to go. And I'm kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen next, but whatever it is and whatever the way this business goes, I feel like I'm going to be ready for it because, some other stupid thing will happen and I'll fall ass backward into another good gig, hopefully.
All right, so good segue to the advice you would give to anybody breaking in. Now, I guess you could give the advice of fall ass backward into things.
Yes,
but
I highly advise it.
It is a good and we've had different reporters on this show who talk about like when a door opens, like go, take those opportunities when you can. But what are some things that you would say to young people who reach out and ask you about how to break into sports media?
Yeah, it's funny. You go from, what was it, Mike Tirico, Joe Buck, and Diana Rossini to me. But I feel like I actually have more to say to a young person coming into this business because it's more likely they're going to not have that job right away than that they are. Like those guys are, those people are also supremely talented and reach the pinnacle of their profession. But more often than not, you're going to wind up as some backwater paper somewhere going, well, how did I get here? Where am I? Who are these people? What is a Charleroi? What is a Monongahela? What is going on here? But you just have to throw yourself into it. And when I do talk to journalism classes, like everyone's always like run away, right? That's what every journalist always says. Don't go into this business. You have no hope. There's no future. I'm the total opposite. I love this job. I love this business. And as bad as things are right now, and they are so bad globally and from a journalism standpoint, there's more good journalism out there than there's ever been before. And there's more avenues for it. Obviously the media illiteracy of the world in our country where they can't tell the difference between what you and I do and what some rando on the street says is a problem. But if you know where to look, there are Substacks out there doing incredible work. There are public journalism out there doing incredible work. There are newspapers, the Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Tribune and the Post Tribune in Northwest Indiana, which my wife is now the editor of. They're doing important work every day at a tiny little small scale that means something to communities. There is more journalism out there than there's ever been. Find a lane. You could be as persistent as you and I were and get your way into what you want to do. But there are so many avenues now to pursue journalism and such a need for it, such a need. Now, I know you and I aren't curing cancer here, but people care about this stuff. They care about their sports. It's infotainment, but it's infotainment that means a lot to a lot of people. And we're covering billion-dollar industries, so there is some actual news that comes of this. Look what everything I've covered with the Blackhawks the last 4 years. I never expected to be, covering things like the lawsuits that the team faced and the scandal and the fallout and doing investigative reporting with the great Katie Strang. This is not stuff that I had ever prepared for, but all the crap I had learned over the years made me and Scott Powers ready for that moment. We were able to jump in and just say, all right, we're going to do this now. So my advice is to just go for it. Like, don't be afraid of journalism. Don't go run from it. The job market's terrible. Yes. The pay can be terrible. Yes. So many reasons, but it's the best job you can have. It's an important job. And there's more of it than there's ever been before. You can find your lane, whatever it might be. It might look different than what you and I do, but there's a need for it. There's a hunger for it in the world. And, you find yourself at a high school baseball game in April and it's 30 degrees out and you forgot your hoodie at the office and there's 500 dead bugs in the press box on the windowsill right in front of you. Like there was that time I was at Valparaiso. Embrace it, man. Go out there and write with your little pencil. Use a pencil because the pen's gonna freeze in the cold weather, and just plow on and have fun with it, man. It's the best job in the world. You have to enjoy it. There's too many people that are jaded on this job, and it shows in their work. You have to show that if you are not enjoying this job, you will be bad at it. To me, it's that simple.
I love it, Laz. It's great advice. I think you and I view this industry very similarly, and probably because we both have degrees from, as I mentioned earlier, the greatest university in all the land, that being Northwestern. But yeah, as we get set for another hockey season, I appreciate you taking the time to tell our listeners how you broke in.
I appreciate you scraping the bottom of the barrel with me after all those big name guests. Thanks.